Okay, next we're going to go to agenda item number 2. Doug, you wanna?
Yes, I'm gonna.
Taking over this one?
I'll introduce Scott Donald from the Community Economic Development Group, and he has an item and a request from you to talk about the Housing Element Advisory Committee.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm here today to seek your commission's nomination for a representative to serve on the Housing Element Advisory Committee. And this is a committee that the City Council just approved last month. It's for an update that we have to do to an element of our general plan. It's the housing element. And every 8 years or so, the state requires us to update our housing element. This time around, we expect that there's going to be a lot of public interest in the housing element, whether it's because of the state housing crisis or homelessness, whatever the issue might be. And in part because of that, the City Council authorized a Housing Element Advisory Committee to assist staff and assist decision makers in going through the process of updating its housing element. And to give you some background, our general plan is our blueprint for how we want Carlsbad to grow over, say, the next 15 or 20 years. And it was adopted in 2015, and it was the result of a lot of community input that maybe some of you participated in from roughly the late 2000s through 2015. All of that input led to a community vision. You may have heard about the Carlsbad Community Vision, which has 8 or 9 principles. And from that vision, the general plan was drafted. The general plan contains a number of elements with regards to land use, mobility, you're probably familiar with that one, public safety, arts and culture. The last element, as a matter of fact, is the housing element. And it's the only element in the general plan that the state requires us to update and receive the state's approval for. We have to update it on about an every 8-year basis. And whereas the general plan is a very broad land use document which looks at the entire city, the housing element does the same, but its focus is, of course, on housing. And there's a statewide housing law objective that requires every city and county in California to provide housing for all of its residents. So the housing element studies not only above market rate housing, but also emergency shelters. It looks at housing for large families and also senior citizens. The whole gamut. It's the housing element's responsibility to look at, whether through data, whether through testimony from the community or from, say, a homeless services provider. All of that information gets filtered through the housing element and eventually results in what's known as a housing plan, which is just a set of goals and policies to show how the community will meet its housing needs over the next 8 years. And this housing element that we're about to work on, actually that we've already started working on, that's the reason why I'm here before you today, is to prepare a housing plan for 2021 through 2029, so basically for the next decade. And the mission or the purpose of this Housing Element Advisory Committee that the City Council approved, and what we're seeking from committee members that will become part of it, are to consider all of the different opinions and insights and advice that people have, and we're seeking committee members who can look at all of this information, balance it, consider those from the community as well as those from a homeless service provider, while balancing that consideration, also making sure that the committee is such that it encourages community participation. And that might have to do as much with making the meetings accessible to all, such as evening meetings, but also making sure they feel welcome as part of the committee. And to assist in that, we're seeking committee members that are eager and willing to put in the time necessary. We anticipate that this committee will probably meet for about a year on a monthly basis through the year 2020. And I recognize for all of the commissions that we're going to, that represents an extra impact on you. You have your Traffic and Mobility Commission meeting, plus this committee meeting perhaps. But by the end of 2020, we hope to present to the decision makers, that would be the Housing Commission, the Planning Commission, and the City Council, a recommended housing element. And that, of course, is the information that we would receive from this Housing Element Advisory Committee. We're not asking committee members to draft the housing element. Instead, we would be presenting information to you for your recommendation. Here's how the committee would be composed. 4 commission representatives, first of all, a member of the Housing Commission, a member of the Planning Commission, the Senior Commission, and also the Traffic and Mobility Commission. I've already been to Planning Commission and Senior Commission. I made presentations to them last week, received 2 nominations from them, and we'll be going to, of course, you today as well as the Housing Commission later this week. In addition to the 4 commission representatives, the committee will also have 5 resident representatives, and we're seeking 1 resident per quadrant, northwest quadrant, northeast quadrant, and so on, and also 1 at-large resident. So a total of 9 members would make up this Housing Element Advisory Committee. All of the meetings would be public. They would be open to anyone who wanted to participate. Likely they'll be in the meeting to make sure it's something that more people can do. We want the meetings to be facilitated to ensure they're run efficiently and expeditiously. As I mentioned, we expect them to occur monthly throughout next year, hopefully beginning in January, and supported by resources. So again, we're not asking the committee to draft the housing element. It's more of a response to the document that we produce to you for your feedback. As far as the nomination and an appointment process, when we receive all commission nominations, we will forward them to the city clerk's office for the mayor's consideration. The mayor is the one that will both consider and confirm the nominations. And then both the commission nominations as well as the residents that have applied to join the committee, that will be considered by the full city council for approval. We hope that they will make their final decision in December of this year to enable this committee to start meeting in January of 2020. And before I go to the next slide, I did want to mention the one caveat to all of this, especially for the commission members, is there must be at least 18 months remaining in a commission member's term at the time of appointment. This is as specified in the charter that the city council approved for this committee. And if you look at the next slide, we've got the terms of all of the Traffic and Mobility Commission members. I think based on this slide, there are just 2 members. Chair Gokan, I'm not sure I said your name correctly, I'm sorry. Okay. And then also Commissioner Johnson, who would not be eligible to join because, of course, they would not have 18 months remaining on their term. And I'll conclude this presentation with just our recommendation to you is that the Traffic and Mobility Commission nominate 1 Traffic and Mobility Commissioner to serve on the Housing Element Advisory Committee. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yes.
So is the person from the commission, are they expected to have sort of a mindset of mobility aspects? Because I know the housing element has a lot of mobility elements related to it based on, I know the affordability of housing and the density and its proximity to transit can affect how many parking spaces they can have and how it's going to affect local traffic. Is the member of our committee supposed to have sort of a representation of the full commission as far as mobility, or is it just like random, whatever you think?
No, I think everything you just said is correct. That's why we're seeking a member from the Traffic and Mobility Commission for those reasons stated. There are some potential growth management implications as well. The mobility standards and that could be impacted. For example, the state provides growth estimates for all communities in California. Carlsbad has its share. More than likely, we're going to have to come up with some land use changes, and maybe based on where those are placed, that's certainly an opportunity for, say, a Traffic and Mobility Commission member to weigh in and say, well, from my standpoint, to the proximity to transit or whatever, yeah, your advice would be appreciated.
Okay, so how did the other commissions, what was the process that they did that they nominated somebody?
Right, and just in a public setting just like this, typically what was done was, I think the last meeting I was at, which was the Senior Commission, one of the commissioners simply expressed interest, and I think the other commissioners agreed with that. I think at the Planning Commission there were 2 different people who wanted to serve, and so there was, not that there was any disagreement, but both of those nominees had to be considered. So it was more just an open vote and then eventual consensus on who should represent.
So who's interested out of the 4 people that? 5. The 5. And that is not right. Out of the 5 that qualify the 15 months minimum, who's interested? You can raise your hand, it's fine. It's Bill. Bill is interested. Brendan?
I have interest. I do have some questions, though. Just looking on from the staff report that was presented to us, I noticed that the composition of members, the traffic and mobility was excluded, but then on the actual resolution 170, there is. So I just want to make sure that this is.
It is correct, yes.
And then in regards to the homeless shelters, or where is that coming from in regards to the city? So they're going to actually be a part of this HEAC.
Oh, HEAC.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Not as a member.
Not as a member, but yeah.
I'm thinking that in part of the deliberations that you do, it might be helpful if there was somebody from Catholic Charities, for example, that could discuss the La Posada de Guadalupe Men's Homeless Shelter, just to provide you with that information and perspective.
So not a person at large, just more of a person that can provide.
Yeah, potentially it could be a resident of Carlsbad that also is a volunteer for Catholic Charities, but it could be anyone as well.
And then the last thing I was looking at the timeline, it looks like, we're starting off, there's some debate or discussion on starting in September 2019. Has there already been some procedures or anything going on yet, or is it?
There's work that staff is doing,
Okay.
and you're right, that is correct. We've gone out to seek a consultant to help us with this effort. We're making these presentations, but there has not been any work that the committee would have done or has started. That will all begin hopefully January.
Okay.
Okay, so we have Brendan. Are you interested?
I'll express interest, but I'm more inclined to, since other people are interested, I'm inclined to support. I thought there was going to be a growth management program, update advisory committee at some point too, so I'd be honored to be considered for that position. Just all the stuff I've been submitting in the last few months. Housing impacts that too, but since there's two other people interested, I would prefer to happily support anybody on this commission. We have a great commission.
Okay, so this is going to be awkward because we have to pick one of two. I am going to vote for Brendan just because of my beliefs. I feel personally, because we have children in school, we are the same demographic as to, family related. I just feel that, to me, he will represent my views as a citizen better than, nothing against Bill personally, but that's what you're doing, but that is just, yeah. That's why it's good we have a variety.
Ageism.
Yeah. Well, my gray hair is
I'll second the nomination.
Okay. Do we vote?
Was that a nomination? Was that a motion?
Do we do a motion, or how do we do?
However you want the motion.
I think that would be the right way to do it.
Okay, I can't make motions, so somebody, because
You can ask for something.
I will ask, because I'm the chair.
I'll make a motion that Commissioner Perez represent us on the Housing Commission.
okay.
All in favor?
That's fine. I think he'd be a fine representative. I'm happy with that. We don't even have to have a vote.
Well, let's just make it official. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone against? Thank you.
Is there a need for an alternate?
So Commissioner Perez is going to represent us in the Housing Element Advisory Committee.
Has been nominated to.
Or we nominated. Represent us until February. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And
Okay.
Bill will be our alternate if there,
And then,
for
yes.
some reason, she cannot serve her term as the.
Yes. Or if you need any guidance, he will be your unofficial. Yes.
Oh, why don't you just slide over
Are you sure you want to see him? Thanks for coming along with.
You gotta scoot over and then
I mean, you're welcome to stay.
Yeah, I'll scoot over so she can have better.
Yeah.
Thank